Hello and welcome back to Pandemic Playground with Dave. Alright, so last time we talked about and experimented with turrets and Gatling pews, but we completely overlooked rockets and missile launchers. Alright, so today we want to play around and experiment with missile turrets and also rocket launchers in Space Engineers. So last time we talked about Gatling pews and also turrets, and we pretty much overlooked the missiles. So when we're talking about the missiles, looking at large grid, we have these missile turrets, which you can kind of auto reload and store rockets in here, and you could do pretty much the same thing as the Gatling turrets, basically, where you can pretty much go inside the control panel, go to the missile turret, you can shoot it, you can do whatever you want. But of course, you can go to control, where you have a camera, aiming system, and you can shoot your rockets this way. So of course, naturally, we want to do the same thing what we did with our Gatling turrets and see how that all kind of works out. One of the biggest things and differences in the Gatling turrets versus the missile or rocket launchers is that there is a large version of the rocket launcher, and there's no large version of the, those standard Gatling turrets or the Gatling pews here, these guys here. So the large grid version, I mean, it's pretty much a little bit different. So the large grid here, as you see here, is like all these rocket ports, and then you have your conveyor ports here. You have one on the side and one on the bottom. So that makes it useful to reloading it based on how it's connected to like your cargo and everything like that, which is nice. And of course, the small version of it, which is this rocket launcher here, does not have any conveyor ports whatsoever, and you have to load up from the front side here with your missiles. So that's a big difference in having small one versus the large grid version, and it's a big difference between the Gatling pews here, where there's no large version of them, so that you can plop them on similar to this. But what the good thing about having a large grid rocket launcher is that you can put it on the rotor system, a hinge system, and also control it, such as this, where you can move it left, right, up, and down. And of course, this is done using the script, the cockpit piston, rotor, and hinge controller on here. And I pretty much discovered that there's a really good reason why I would use the script over using the gyroscopes non-scripted version, especially for large grid. Because with the script, we can easily move this up, down, left, and right fairly easily, and you don't have chunky gyroscopes put on here like this, or something similar to that. So that's when I would probably use a script. But other than that, if it's all small grid, I would probably just plop on the one or two small gyroscopes that you can put on, which is a lot easier there. Right, so having this rocket launcher is fairly nice. We can move it up and down, left, right, as we mentioned. It does have the red dot laser pointer. So right now I put on the camera view, and you'll see there's a bit of a little red dot there, and we can zoom in with the camera and shoot the rockets that way. So that's always a fun way of kind of creating a rocket launching system. And this is just large grid, which is perfect. The only issue I have is that the camera, it can't pretty much line up to the middle here, but of course that's usually not the case anyways. It's always going to be a little off from it too. But yeah, this is a quick little way of doing a rocket launcher build, which works out, where you can control its motion just like the base one here. Of course, if you wanted something different, that's one way of doing it. There's many other ways to do it, to be honest, but of course that's just showing some simple quick ways as I'm playing around with it. And of course, when we're jumping onto the smaller grid version of it, it's going to look like this, which is very similar to the Gatling turret here. The only reason why I use the connected one is just that it's just a smaller block than using like a rotor system or something like that. So this one is the same as the large one, it's just a small grid version. You can it's the same thing. Go into the control panel, you can easily control it by going into the missile turret and control. And it looks a little different because the rocket launching part of it a bit different. I think you can knock out trees with this thing. Oh, nice. Yeah, so it takes down trees. It doesn't explode the tree to smithereens, but that worked out pretty well. So from there, I pretty much try to mimic what I've done with my Gatling turrets and Gatling pews kind of situation to see if I can make anything that's, you know, decent with rocket launchers in the case of, you know, having a second person manning it. And it's pretty much the same thing here. This one is the unconnected connector version with the gyroscope where I can just move left and right, and it still works okay. But again, this one doesn't move up and down, which is a bit of an issue for the most part, in most cases actually, but it kind of looks alright. It's not too bad. The only big problem is that you can't really reload this thing automatically because the small grid missile launcher or the rocket launcher, it just doesn't allow for that. So these are kind of pointless. They don't work out too well. So if you want something low profile and you can actually aim up and down, I decided to make something like this, which is, you know, fairly simple. It has 2 gyroscopes, and a small hinge and a connector. So unfortunately, this whole thing doesn't, you know, connect or reload automatically anyway. So that's why I went with the smaller hinge over there. So now at least we can go up and down with this here. So the way I set it up currently, and you don't necessarily have to do it this way, but it seems to be a lot smoother, is to have 1 gyroscope on override and 1 not on override. And as you see here, it can actually wiggle a lot faster, but if you look at my settings really quick, I did change the power to 21%. This could be 50% if anything, and the gyroscope here is set on override. And as you see here, it moves a lot quicker this way. But I think around between 20 and 30 is a pretty smooth kind of motion. And of course, what's good about this is that we can go left, right, up, down really easily. And as you see here, we can also have some red dots as well to shoot down any ships or anything, as long as it's pretty close. So this was kind of a nifty way of building it. But again, this has to be reloaded manually, so that's always a bit of a problem. And even showing this in my previous video of the Gatling turrets, and you can always replace these guys with the rocket launchers. And this is the scriptless version of maneuvering a rotor and hinge blocks here. So I failed to showcase this last time, but it's the same as the one we just looked at just before, where we can move up and down, left and right. And this is all scriptless. This is based on having one gyroscope on override and the other gyroscope, or gyroscopes in this case, at low power. And of course, you gotta change the torque a little bit too on the rotor and the hinge. So the hinge has a bit of torque, not too much. So I moved it down a bit so that it doesn't just flop down over when you're not sitting in it. And of course, the rotor you can put at 0 torque, is fine. And you can easily move left, right, up, and down. So that's the scriptless version of it. And of course, you can put rocket launchers here as well if you wanted to. But again, using the small rocket launchers, it's not automatically reloadable. So of course, in order to do that, we had to swap over to these guys. So this guy here is called the reloadable rocket launcher. So it only comes in small grid, which is fine because the large grid already has a reloadable option because it has the conveyor ports. So the smallest and compact way I could think of doing this would be this here. And this one is the same as the one before, but with 1 gyro with override and 1 just being on. We can move up, down, left, right. We can arm it, and we have the little laser dot to shoot whatever we need to with the rockets here. And this one's going to be reloadable based on the conveyor ports, so we don't have to manually dump stuff in. So in some ways, this is kind of like the most compact I can think of, being able to move up, down, left, right. So you just put a seat right on top of the reloadable portion of the missile. But, you know, why stop there? So I thought I'd just keep going and kind of mess around and combine the 2 systems, because ideally you probably want to have some rockets and missiles and also a Gatling turret or Gatling gun on your system here. So I like this system because it always looks like a little bit of a mech system, which is pretty cool. So I left everything in the front the same. The only difference is that I added a reloadable rocket in the back here, and we can stack a whole bunch of them here if we wanted to, which is great with the reloadable rockets or missile launchers here. But I was actually surprised that this actually worked out. I was a little scared that the missile may run into this little headpiece here, but it doesn't. So that was a lucky thing, or a good thing. So we can load up our Gatling, so we can shoot it as you see here with the red dot. And then of course we can swap into our rockets, and again you'll see red dots for the rocket as well, and we can shoot it from the left and right side of the reloadable rocket launcher. And of course you can't really dictate which one goes first, it just automatically does it. But this one works out pretty well and it's not hitting itself, which is surprising. But another cool thing about it is the way I set it up. You can always kind of change the direction of the rocket if you wanted to as well, because it's on a hinge. Definitely don't need to put on a hinge, of course. Good, just put on a conveyor right next to it, right here, and then put on top of it without the hinge and just start launching it forward that way. So I thought this was a pretty nifty way of kind of combining the two, the Gatling gun and a rocket launcher, so that's all reloadable, and it's a secondary seat for, you know, a friend or so just to play around with. It's a little bulkier than other kind of builds, but you have all the different types of offense here in small grid version, and it's pretty compact. And if I can turn this into a mech somehow, that would be pretty cool. Alright, so last but not least, I built pretty much the same exact thing. Try to see if I can make it a little bit more compact to make it look cooler and add in a lot more kind of weapons on it. And I kind of thought of it this way. Instead of, you know, having it launch out in the back here, I pretty much put it on the sides, on top, and added the Gatlings on the side here, which is fairly compact lengthwise, but height-wise it's probably 1 block tall, which is not a big difference or a big deal in this case. And this one you can use script or scriptless depending on how you want to use it, because you're really just plopping on small little gyroscopes on here for small grid. So this one works out pretty well too. And because it's on the scripted version of it, we have the up, down, left, right here. You can always plop in the gyroscopes instead, which works out pretty well. And we have, of course, our camera here, and we can swap from Gatling to rockets as well. So we have all that there, which is awesome, and it shoots a whole bunch of rockets. So we have 3 reloadable rocket launchers, so all three of them will shoot. Unfortunately, it's not 2 for each rocket launcher, so it's 1 for each rocket launcher here. So you'll see 3, 3, 3, 3 coming out that way, which is not too bad, but it's a decent amount of rockets to be launched. And of course we can switch right into our Gatling turrets really quickly. So those are fun little options here for a secondary seat for, you know, your offensive on a ship or something like that. Of course, I know some people had mentioned in the comments that, yeah, likely you're not going to have something like this on a ship because it might just fall apart. Yes, that's true. I just want to show you guys another odd way of kind of doing that system. But yes, you can easily just do a rotor system, hinge system, just to get your up, down, left, rights in that sense. So as you see here, there's a pretty quick little build of how to add in everything: rocket launcher, Gatling turrets, and so forth. You can do this in many different ways, many different designs. These are some quick little designs I just wanted to put together and play around with and test them to see how well they work. Another interesting way to do all this, if you wanted to, you could put the reloadable missile launcher on top of the hinge like this, and then if you really wanted to, you can just add a little Gatling turret on top, like so. So you have both a Gatling turret and a missile launcher in this case here. But if you want to go even further, you can actually add more kind of static Gatling turrets here, or Gatling guns, and you can use that as an all-out assault as well. So this all kind of works out decently. But of course, so the top one here will give you the automatic shooting, while the rest is that you're controlling. So that kind of works out in some ways. But of course, in order to control something like this, we need to put in a remote control system, because the gyro systems are on a subgrid in this case here. I mean, which is fairly easy to do. All you're doing is pretty much plopping an antenna and a remote control the right way. Just get into the remote, control it, and we can move it up, down, left, right, as you see here. And as I mentioned before, since we have the block weapons here, we have the Gatling and the rocket launcher. So Gatlings on the side, rockets on the bottom, and we still have automatic Gatling control on the top here. So honestly, I think in a future build, if I were to make something like this, it might be this, because you have automatic shooting and you have rockets and additional controllable Gatlins all at the same time. And of course, if you want to find a way to kind of plop on missile turrets, you could definitely do something like that too. And that's probably going to be based on a design something like this, where you have the Gatling turret on this side, missile turret on this side. We could plop on maybe the reloadable here and the Gatling in the front. So that kind of works out, but I'm not going to build it. But again, as I mentioned, this was just playing around with different builds with rocket launchers because we didn't talk about it last time. And hopefully it piques your interest in building something like this for the future or for your builds. But as I mentioned many times, this is not the only way to build these things. There's always many different creative ways to do it. And I'm pretty sure you guys would come up with it and kind of showcase it too. Alright, so thank you very much for watching this experiment, or aka Dave just playing around with random things for now. I think the next video I have an actual experiment that might be interesting to you guys, so stay tuned for that next week. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed these builds, this experiment with the rocket launchers and missile turrets. If you did, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs up, like the video, consider subscribing to the channel, drop a comment down below, and of course, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.